Whether you're a student trying to get into the world of photography, or if you're a hobbyist, you may have heard of Capture One, specifically Capture One Express, which is the free version of Capture One. And if you haven't heard so already, Capture One is an excellent software, but the free version is coming to an end, which means that you're going to have to make a decision of either paying for the software or not using it and going to something else. Before we continue on, let's take a moment here to talk about what raw images are in case you're not familiar with them. Sometimes when you're taking pictures, you might accidentally underexpose or overexpose, but there's other times where you have really bright items and really dark items in your photos, such as snow and buildings, right? The buildings could be much darker than the snow or the sky. And one thing you can do to kind of help with that is to shoot in RAW. And when you use RAW, you capture a lot more of the sensor data and you get a lot better colors that you can recover if an image is underexposed or overexposed or both. Now I'm going to contrast this to a JPEG file where processing is done, right? So your camera applies sharpening to some degree. Your camera has the white balance locked in for the image. Things like that. A lot of your color information is pretty much locked in, and the extra information that your camera deems not necessary also gets stripped out from the file, and you don't have a whole lot of information other than the kind of like the bare minimum to create an image for you to share online. Now, if you want more control, for example, if you want more color data in your file, you would need the raw image. But you can't just use this raw image anywhere, because this raw image is a special file that's specific for your camera. Not only make, but the model as well, right? Different models of the cameras will have different formats of the files. So you take these raw files, they're much bigger than JPEG files. You bring them into the editing software. You make all your adjustments. So you have your highlights, your shadows, white balance. Some editing software will allow you to change the lens profile so you can take into account chromatic aberration, lens distortion, things like that. You can get pretty detailed with that. And then you export it to a JPEG file. Well, what does all this mean? Well, I got a couple of examples for you. I was walking around Boston Common and I found this squirrel that was pretty interesting. It wasn't really afraid of humans. Maybe it was just hungry. It was just going to people to see if they had food. I didn't have any food, but I was able to get within maybe several feet of the squirrel and was able to get some pictures. One of them being this one where he was scratching behind his ear. I set my camera to take both RAW and JPEG pictures so we can compare them side by side. So let's take a look at the JPEG picture first. I'm going to import this JPEG picture into a program called GIMP, which is a free open source editing software. And if you look at it, you'll notice that the exposure is generally pretty good. The squirrel is pretty well exposed. You can see the details in the tree, but the snow is a little bit too bright where it kind of blows out in the highlights. So what we're going to do is we're going to edit the highlights and try to bring it down and see if we can recover some of that. But as you can see, it's not doing a really good job there. Just to give GIMP another chance, we're going to go to a more advanced tool called Color Curves, and we'll bring down the highlights from there. As you can see, the brightest part of that highlight is still kind of clipping, so it's not really recovering that 100%. Now contrast this to something like Capture One or any RAW editing software. You're going to have a lot more data to work with. So if we take the raw image and import it into Capture One, we're going to bring down the highlights to recover it, and you can see there's a lot more data that we can work with, to the point where the brightest part is still not clipped. And that's pretty cool. And you can do something pretty similar with shadows that are too dark and bring them up so that they're not underexposed too much anymore. So for us Capture One Express users, we have a couple of options here. We either pay for the software and then we can continue using Capture One software, or B, not pay for the software, get kicked out, and then we'll have to switch to something else like open source software, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But in my opinion, and of course anyone can say anything on the internet these days, in my opinion, I think that's a bit of an abrupt change, because you have all these users that are kind of taking advantage of the free software that was really advertised as free, right? The Capture One Express is at no charge. And I understand Capture One has a free license, and licenses is how you control how users access your software and use it.
But I think there's a better way of going about this, and if I can kind of reverse time and influence their decision, I think maybe a slightly better way of going about this is to say, hey, if you're using the free software, you can continue using it for free, but future editions where we add additional support for future cameras, that's going to be now a paid product. Okay, at least it doesn't lock out the current free users, but I think a even better way of going about this is to have a free tier and sort of following the DaVinci Resolve model. So if you're not familiar with DaVinci Resolve, it's a video editing software. They have a free tier, they have a paid tier, but the free tier has a lot of features in it, and it also has features that the paid tier has, but it gives you a chance to try it out. If Capture One follows a similar model, they can say, hey, we have a free tier, but it has limitations where, let's say, you can export at a maximum resolution of 24 megapixels. 24 megapixels, in my opinion, is plenty for your average user. And if you want anything higher than that, then you have to go for the paid product, right? I'm just making up stuff here. And more advanced control, for example, lens distortion control, like lens profile stuff, along with the chromatic aberration controls. Maybe those are more of the paid tier. Those are more the premium tools that you have to pay for. And if you want to try it out, it'll put a big watermark on your image just for you to try it out. And if you like it, you can go for the paid one. But it gives them a chance to try out Capture One without a 30-day limitation. Now, another topic that's kind of floating around the web is people are saying, hey, you spend thousands of dollars on your gear, on the hardware part, but when it comes to the software, that's kind of like an afterthought. And yes, I guess I'm kind of guilty with that too, because the hardware, you can't really get it for free unless someone gives it to you or something. That's the part where we think, okay, that's where the money goes. And as I've mentioned before, there are options out there that allow you to edit raw images using open source software. Two that I know of from the past are Darktable and RawTherapee. Both of them I haven't really tried yet. I just installed it on my PC and I'm looking forward to kind of comparing the two. I'll probably start with Darktable first and then see how I like it and then go from there. But I don't know enough about it to do a comparison, so that's not in today's video. That's on my to-do list to try to learn new software, which is funny because in my last video with the Happy New Year video, I did say, hey, try out something new, right? So kind of going along that theme, I guess that's a good segue to this video. I'm going to try a new RAW editor starting with Darktable. So what do you guys think about all this? Are you planning to switch to a paid copy of Capture One? Are you happy with Lightroom? Are you planning to switch over to something like RawTherapee or Darktable? I think at one point I was playing around with a plugin for GIMP that allows you to import a raw image and edit directly in GIMP. That was like a bunch of years ago. I have to probably go back my notes and check what that was about. But I think there are different alternatives out there, even beyond of what I was talking about. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Do you agree or do you disagree with what I said? I'm curious to see what your thoughts are because I've pretty much used Capture One for a bunch of years now and I'm looking to switch to something else as I mentioned before. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as always, and I'll see you in the next video.